Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Ukrainian President Zelensky says Russian shelling continues despite Moscow's announced Easter ceasefire. Blasts are reported in the Russian-held Donetsk during the same 30-hour truce window. The US Supreme Court temporarily blocks the Trump administration from deporting a group of Venezuelan migrants under a rarely used wartime law. The Trump government urges the court to lift the order. Israeli forces continue striking the Gaza Strip, with 54 people reported killed in the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, Hamas says the fate of Israeli hostage remains unknown after his guard's body is found following an Israeli airstrike. Iran and the United States agree to begin drafting a framework for a potential nuclear deal after a top US official calls very good progress. President Trump threatens military action if Iran doesn't swiftly accept a new deal to halt nuclear weapons development. Thousands of anti-Trump protesters take to the streets in communities as large and small on Saturday. The demonstrations coincide with the 250th anniversary of the start of the American Revolutionary War. Al-Qaeda-affiliated JNIM says it killed 70 Benin soldiers in simultaneous raids on 2 border posts. Reuters news agency, citing site intelligence, reports the claim is unverified as Sahel insurgents push south. Pakistan deports almost 20,000 Afghans this month ahead of its April the 30th deadline for undocumented migrants. The Taliban says 700 to 800 families leave daily as Minister Ashaq Dur consults in Kabul, with up to 2 million more expected. Oman's Sultan is set to visit Moscow on Monday, days after Muscat mediated talks between the United States and Iran. The Sultan will hold talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin, set for Tuesday. Our top story today, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky marked Easter with a message urging citizens not to lose hope for peace. Standing outside Kiev's St. Sophia Cathedral, he said Ukraine continues to believe in each other and in eventual justice. Let's listen in to what he said.
Знаємо, що захищаємо, знаємо, за що боремось, за кого і заради кого. І тому кожного разу, як би важко нам не було, ми все одно не втрачаємо віру. Бо ця віра один в одного, в тих, хто стоїть поруч з тобою, в українців, в українок. Віра в те, що зло має свою годину, а Бог має свій.
The Ukrainian president also accused Russia of faking a ceasefire during the Easter period while continuing its attacks on the front lines. In a social media statement, Zelensky said Russian forces kept up isolated advances and targeted Ukrainian troops overnight, despite trying to give the impression of a truce. He said a 30-day ceasefire could have opened the door to peace, but noted that President Vladimir Putin had already rejected a proposal for a full and unconditional halt to the fighting. According to the Russian media, several explosions rocked Russian-held Donetsk in eastern Ukraine despite a Kremlin-declared Easter ceasefire. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin attended an Easter service where Patriarch Kirill, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church and a staunch supporter of Putin and the war in Ukraine, led the ceremony. Yesterday, Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered a unilateral Easter ceasefire in Ukraine and ordered Russian troops to end hostilities. Let's take a listen to what he said.
Руководствуясь гуманитарными соображениями, сегодня с 18:00 часов до 00 часов с воскресенья на понедельник российская сторона объявляет пасхальное перемирие. Приказываю на этот период остановить все боевые действия. Исходим из того, что украинская сторона последует нашему примеру.
Air raid sirens rang out in Kiev and Kharkiv on the evening of April the 19th, just hours after President Putin declared a surprise one-day Easter ceasefire in Ukraine. In Kiev, the sirens lasted around 15 minutes, though no attacks followed. Let's hear what residents from Russia and Ukraine had to say about the Easter ceasefire.
Я считаю, что оно ни к чему не приведет. Пасхальное перемирие не приведет к миру. Потому что Украина все равно не будет соблюдать эти договоренности. Так же, как они сейчас продолжают бомбить эти наши энергообъекты. Понимаете? Мы прекратили вроде бы как, а они как продолжают, так и продолжают.
Розумієте, ця людина не договороспособна, він не вміє домовлятися, він вміє тільки силою брати, він ніколи не піде на домовленість. Так, як ми хочемо, він хоче так, як він хоче. Не буде перемир'я. Дуже жаль. Ночі ми чекаємо в Україні, а особливо в Києві, прильоти ракет. Тому перемир'я не буде. Це моя думка.
We are joined by Guatam Mukerji, senior journalist, to discuss this further. Thank you very much, Guatam, for joining us as always. What are the underlying motivations behind this announcement of a 30-hour Easter ceasefire from the Kremlin?
Well, one thing that is underlining this is the common religion. Russian Orthodox Church is also prominent in Ukraine. Kiev has always been a prominent part of the Russian Orthodox Church. Its cathedral is famous. And from Tsarist times, Ukraine was part of Russia. So that is one part, the historical and the religious commonality. Second part is, I think Russia is aiming towards peace and tranquility in the not too distant future. It has asked America, and America is well inclined to do so, is recognize the Crimea as Russian territory. If that goes through smoothly, that then will probably lead to the Donetsk region, where 20% of Ukraine is in a Russian possession and could become part of Russia. Eventually, a peace accord will have to be drummed up between Ukraine and Russia, particularly since America has indicated it has no appetite to keep on mediating between the two for any length of time. So there's a time limit involved. If they want America's participation, they have to get on with it.
Yes, Guatam, what does this say about the state of the current relations with Russia and Ukraine? Obviously, you've still, even in this religious day, you've still got accusations flying back and forth of them violating this 30-day ceasefire. You've obviously also got the fact that Ukraine accepted Russia's proposal of this ceasefire, whereas you've got Russia rejecting the previously accepted US forwarded ceasefire deal. What does this say about the current state of Russia-Ukraine relations in regard to a ceasefire deal?
I think it's going to head towards a simmering down of this kind of toing and froing. Another indicator that things will normalize soon is the MOU that has been signed between Ukraine and America with regard to the rare earths in Ukraine. So all of these things would not be thought of as worth doing unless you're going to call this war off. Now, who wants the war to continue? Ukraine cannot on its own. Europe, for all its bluster, will probably find itself between a rock and a hard place to both finance it and supply the military equipment. Any suggestion of trying to post troops in Ukraine, either in a peacekeeping manner or any other, will be resisted stoutly by Russia. So this is all heading towards a wind down.
Yes. Guatam Mukerji, thank you very much for joining us, but you are staying with us. We now move over to the Middle East. In an update, Qatar's top negotiator has voiced frustration over stalled Gaza ceasefire talks, saying lives are at risk as negotiations drag on. In an interview, Mohammed al-Khalafi called the situation urgent, warning that delays are costing lives daily as Israeli strikes continue. Qatar, along with Egypt and the US, helped broker the initial Gaza truce in January, but talks for a second phase broke down in March. Hamas has rejected Israel's latest offer for a 45-day ceasefire, calling for a permanent end to the war instead. Despite the setbacks, al-Khalafi says Qatar remains committed to reviving the deal. Additionally, at least 54 Palestinians have been killed in a new wave of Israeli airstrikes across the Gaza Strip, targeting areas such as Gaza City, Khan Yunis, Beit Lahia and Al-Baraj. In Khan Yunis alone, 11 people were killed when Israeli forces struck tents sheltering displaced families. These airstrikes come during one of the deadliest phases of the war, with nearly 1,700 Palestinians killed since Israel ended a temporary ceasefire on March the 18th and resumed its assault. Meanwhile, Hamas has released a third video showing Israeli hostage Elkana Bohbot, who was taken during the October 7th attack. Israel has condemned the video as part of a psychological warfare campaign aimed at pressuring the government. In a separate statement, Hamas confirmed that it had lost contact with the person responsible for guarding Israeli-American soldier Edan Alexander, who was also taken hostage in October. We stay in the region now. The United States and Iran made progress in a second round of high-stakes talks on Tehran's nuclear program on Saturday and agreed to meet again next week. The Oman-mediated talks in Rome lasted for about 4 hours. Tehran's top diplomat, Abbas Araghchi, declared it a good meeting that yielded progress and stated that they managed to reach a better understanding on a series of principles and goals. He also said that negotiations will continue and move into the next phase, in which expert-level meetings will begin on Wednesday in Oman, and that the experts will have the opportunity to start designing a framework for an agreement. Let's take a closer look at what the Iranian foreign minister had to say.
در ادامه جلسه گذشته این بار هم جلسه خوبی بود و میتونم بگم که رو به جلو هست مذاکرات. ما این بار موفق شدیم در خصوص یک سری اصول و اهداف به یک تفاهم بهتری برسیم و نهایتاً قرار شد که مذاکرات ادامه پیدا بکنه و وارد مرحله بعدی بشه.
Iran's foreign ministry spokesman Ismail Baqai said that the parties have agreed to resume indirect talks at a technical level over the next few days and subsequently continue at the level of 2 senior negotiators next Saturday on April the 26th. The Foreign Ministry of Oman, which is mediating the nuclear negotiations between the United States and Iran, said the two sides were seeking an agreement that guarantees the Islamic Republic does not possess nuclear weapons. Oman also said that the third round would be in Muscat, returning to the site of the first talks a week ago. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reaffirmed his commitment to preventing Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons, declaring he would not waver in that effort. Here's what the Israeli Prime Minister had to say.
אני מחויב למנוע מאיראן נשק גרעיני. אני לא מוותר על זה, אני לא מרפה מזה, ואני לא נסוג מזה. לא מילימטר.
We now move over to North America, where the US Supreme Court has stepped in to block President Trump's controversial use of an obscure law to deport Venezuelan migrants without due process. In a dramatic late-night intervention, the court halted expulsions under the 1798 Alien Enemies Act, a law last used during the World War II. The emergency ruling follows imminent deportations planned for Friday, which would have seen dozens of Venezuelans sent to a notorious prison in El Salvador, with little chance to challenge their cases. Two conservative justices dissented in the decision. The Trump administration claims these expulsions target Venezuelan criminal gangs now labelled as terrorists. Critics, however, argue the move threatens constitutional rights. The American Civil Liberties Union praised the ruling, saying the deportees were at risk of indefinite detention without a fair hearing. The government now seeks to continue deportations under other legal grounds. We once again stay in the United States, where thousands of protesters across the United States took to the streets on Saturday, voicing opposition to President Donald Trump's targeting Trump's hardline policies. The protests focus on deportations, government firings, and the ongoing conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine. Demonstrations were held in Washington, New York City, Chicago, and other cities around the United States. Outside the White House, protesters chanted "Trump must go now," calling for action on deportations and solidarity with federal workers fired under the Trump administration. Since his inauguration, President Trump, along with his ally Elon Musk, has overseen the firing of over 200,000 federal workers and efforts to dismantle key agencies. The administration has also targeted universities and detained foreign students, further fueling nationwide protests. This marks the second consecutive day of nationwide demonstrations since Trump took office. Let's take a listen in to what some of the protesters had to say.
I think there's been dozens of impeachable offenses committed, and Congress is not doing anything. The courts are standing up, but we can't just rely on that. Our government is not functioning the way it was meant to in the Constitution.
He's done so much to destroy our country in less than 100 days.
This is my fourth protest, and typically I would sit back and wait for the next election, and we cannot do that right now. We've lost too much already. We can't afford to do that. We're doing this for civil rights, human rights, the protection of all of the agencies that protect people's laborers and finances, so many things. The people that have been whisked away to foreign nations in terrible prisons, and un-American things are happening. It is not okay, it is not normal. So that's what keeps.
We are now joined by Guatam Mukerji, senior journalist, once again to discuss this further. Guatam, 1865 saw the end of the American Civil War. Back then it was North versus South. Now all 50 states are protesting against the current presidential administration. What does this tell us about the political polarization in the United States right now?
The polarization between the Republicans, particularly the Trump Republicans, and the Democrats, the Democrats are made up of a lot of different groups. Some of them are on the far left. They're practically communists. Some are very pro-Israel. Some are being pro-Israel is a general American stance, and there are Democrats who are pro-Israel. But a great deal of them are also pro-Palestine, Hamas, and so on. You've got a free run all this time under the Democrats to, protest the American involvement in the Middle East alongside Israel. Now, they do not have a free run. They are being clamped down upon. The illegal immigrants are being deported. Gangs are being, caught and either jailed or deported. The judiciary, to at least parts of the judiciary, are up in arms. Even this latest ruling against Trump had two dissenting judges who will be presenting their papers, I think, in a day or so. So it isn't unanimous by any means. There are over 80 different court cases against the Trump administration already. But I must say the Trump administration is undaunted. Its core support base, as well as its position in Congress and the Senate, is strong, and it intends to pursue the policies it was elected for. Various people who are trying to paint this out as undemocratic, un-American, are actually saying that, you know, we've had a free lunch and who are you to take it away?
Guatam Mukerji, thank you very much for joining us. We now move on and back to the Middle East. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Gutierrez has expressed grave concern over recent US airstrikes in Yemen that have reportedly killed at least 80 people and wounded 150. The strikes, which took place on April the 17th and 18th near the port of Ras Issa, targeted Houthi rebels who control large parts of Yemen. The US military stated that the airstrikes were aimed at cutting off supplies and funds for the Iran-backed group. Gutierrez also raised concerns about potential damage to the port and the risk of oil spills into the Red Sea. The attack marks the deadliest strike in Washington's 15-month campaign against the Houthis. The group has continued missile and drone attacks on Israel and ships in the Red Sea, with protesters across Yemen rallying against the US involvement. Gutierrez called for all parties to exercise restraint amid fears of further escalation. Let's move over to South Asia, where rescuers carried out efforts for over 12 hours after a building collapsed in India's New Delhi and killed at least 11 people. A rescue official said 22 people have been rescued after the collapse took place at around 3 a.m. local time. The Delhi police has shared a list of the deceased and the injured in the tragedy. According to the list, the 60-year-old landlord of the building and a 7 from his family were also among those killed. Delhi Chief Minister Rekha Gupta has expressed grief over the lives lost in the collapse. She has confirmed that a probe into the reasons for the devastating incident has been initiated, and rescue teams from various agencies are engaged in search and rescue operations. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi also expressed his condolences and announced an ex gratia of rupees 200,000 from the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund for the next of kin for each of the deceased. The injured would be given rupees 50,000 each, he said on a post on X. We move back over to North America, where Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has unveiled a bold new economic plan that promises tax cuts, increased defence and infrastructure spending, and less reliance on the United States. Speaking at a press conference, Carney said Canada is in crisis and needs disciplined investment, not wasteful spending. He plans to reduce government spending growth from 9% to just 2% without cutting transfers to provinces or to individuals. His platform projects a federal deficit of 1.96% of GDP per year, gradually falling to 1.35% by 2028. He also pledges to balance the operating budget within 3 years. For the first time in Canada's history, the budget would separate operating and capital spending, a move Carney says will bring clarity and accountability. Defence spending will rise above NATO's 2% target, with new investments in transatlantic security alongside European partners. Let's jump over the pond to the United Kingdom, where Chancellor Rachel Reeves has reaffirmed Britain's commitment to economic engagement with China, calling disengagement very foolish ahead of her Washington visit next week. In an interview with The Telegraph, Reeves backed stronger ties with the world's second largest economy, highlighting the government's pro-engagement stance. She recalled her recent visit to China for the 11th China, UK and Economic Financial Dialogue, which secured new licences and quotas for British firms and delivered a deal worth an estimated £600 million. Reeves also supported Chinese fast fashion giant Shein listing on the London Stock Exchange and dismissed concerns over riding Chinese-made electric vehicles. Her remarks underscore the Starmer government's push to deepen trade and financial links with Beijing, despite growing global concerns over China's role in sensitive sectors. The UK's financial sector remains central to these efforts. Let's move over to the Indo-Pacific, where China's Shenzhou 19 astronauts are wrapping up a months-long mission aboard the Taigong space station with intensified scientific experiments and technology tests. Tsai, Langdong and Wang have been conducting advanced research in microgravity since launching last year. Their recent focus includes kinematic studies using 3D structured light video, fine motor control tests and biomechanical research on movement and muscle loading in space. They've also installed a high-capacity refrigeration system outside the station, key to advancing China's thermal control tech for future missions. With their return to Earth approaching in late April or early May, the crew has been preparing the station, performing inspections, organising supplies and maintaining daily health routines. The Shenzhou 19 crew is expected to land at the Dongfeng site in Inner Mongolia, coinciding with another successful chapter in China's growing space program. We move over to Australasia, where 6 people have tragically lost their lives in drowning incidents along Australia's east coast. The latest victim, a fisherman who was swept off the rocks near Guatam Beach, south of Sydney. Despite efforts by emergency services to rescue 2 people from the surf, 1 man could not be revived, while a 14-year-old boy is recovering in hospital. Dangerous surf conditions, including massive swells, have dominated the weekend, with warnings issued by Surf Life Saving Australia. On Friday, 3 people drowned in New South Wales, while a woman died and a man went missing after being swept out to sea in Victoria. On Saturday, another fisherman lost his life under similar conditions. Surf Life Saving Australia has urged beachgoers to stick to patrolled areas, as over 600 people have drowned at unpatrolled beaches in the last decade. South Korea's top economic officials are headed to Washington this week for key trade talks with the United States. Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok and Trade Minister An Duck-yang will meet US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. The meetings will happen on the sidelines of the IMF and World Bank spring sessions. Seoul's Trade Ministry says Washington initiated the upcoming tariff talks. This comes after President Donald Trump announced 25% reciprocal tariffs on South Korean goods, though those measures are currently on hold. We now have some breaking news coming in from Europe, where Russia says it has repelled Ukrainian attacks in eastern Donetsk, accusing Kiev of violating an Easter truce declared by President Vladimir Putin. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, Ukrainian forces launched overnight assaults in the villages of Sakaria, Balka and Bokatyur, both under Russian control in the Donetsk People's Republic. Moscow says its troops successfully pushed back the offensives. The announcement comes just hours after Putin declared an Easter ceasefire, which he was meant to allow religious observances across the conflict zone. There was no immediate comment from Ukrainian officials. We have more breaking news coming in. The Vatican said that the Pope Francis had a brief private meeting with US Vice President J.D. Vance on Sunday, the last day of the Republicans' visit to Rome. The Vatican wrote in a brief statement that the meeting, which lasted a few minutes, gave the opportunity to exchange greetings on Easter Sunday, and stated that the encounter took place at the Pope's residence shortly before 11:30 a.m. local time. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.